to the School of Continuing Education's 5th community lecture. We offer a community lecture that is open to anyone, to the public, the 3rd Monday of every month. And this is the 5th. And I hope that you will come to every single one of our lectures. Today, we're very honored and proud to have Dr. Maha ElShinnawy. And I'm very, very honored because of one thing. My name is Dina Borai, and I'm the Dean of the School of Continuing Education. So I am a woman leader. And I'm very excited that I have this wonderful role model of a woman leader and a very, very highly successful and international woman leader. So that's why I am especially delighted that I have the honor to welcome you today, Dr. ElShinnawy. I'm going to say a few words about Dr. ElShinnawy. I know you must have read her bio, but I want to just focus on who she is. I mean, she's an academic. That means, of course, she's a professor. And she teaches in the Department of Management of the School of Business of AUC. And the School of Business is one of AUC's 6 schools. And one of the most important recognition it's a very significant recognition that Dr. ElShinnawy has earned is that she is the 65th out of the top CEOs in Middle East in 2011. And what is even more amazing, she's listed as one of the 100 most powerful Arab women. So we have somebody who really has a major significance in the Arab world. She's also, I mean, as you can see, she's the director of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Entrepreneurship and Leadership Program. It's a very special program that AUC is very proud to house, focusing on Arab women. And Dr. ElShinnawy herself has this special focus on teaching business and management skills to women in particular. Of course, her work is not only about women. She's also done research in the effects of culture, collaboration, communication on human interaction and performance. And I think this is something extremely important because this would set a milestone for women entrepreneurship, and it helps women to overcome all of the problems and not just the culture problems. Because women have both culture problems and business and entrepreneurship problems. By the way, besides Dr. Maha being this very high-powered woman leader, she's also a mother and a wife, and she has 3 children. So I just want to say that I think all women leaders, we live double lives. We have our career, and we are very strong, and at the same time, we have our personal life as mothers and wives. So she is a marvelous example of a very successful woman in both life and career. I'm very honored to welcome you, Dr. Maha. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dina, for this very, very warm welcome and these kind words, much too kind, actually. I'm really honored to be with you today. As Dr. Dina has mentioned, I am a professor in the School of Business at the American University in Cairo. I actually teach besides being the director of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women Entrepreneurship and Leadership Program, which I'm actually not going to talk about today. What I'd like to focus on today are the areas of my teaching interests. I teach 2 different courses. One of them is about business ethics, and I teach that at the undergraduate level. And I also teach a leadership course at the MBA level. And I've been doing this for a few years now. My bachelor's and my MBA are both from the American. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay. My bachelor's and my MBA are from AUC. I actually graduated in this room many years ago. And my PhD is from UCLA. I was also a professor at Texas A&M University in the United States for many years. And I came to Egypt recently, and I started, like I said, teaching those 2 classes. And, business ethics is one realm, and then leadership is another. And through that, I started to become interested in the notion of leadership related to ethics, and thus the title of my lecture today, which is basically Responsible Leadership in a Corrupt Age. And so I tried to meld the 2 together. I'm kind of excited about tonight's lecture because it brings together 2 of the things that I'm passionate about as a teacher, as a professor, things that I teach. And some of these ideas I've been talking about for a long time, and some of them are fairly new. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to say, but I don't want to take too much time because I know you have questions. And so I'll try my best to be brief. I won't go into everything in detail, but I'll give you a little bit of a flavor, and I'll leave it to the questions if there are certain areas where you want to delve deeper. I'm not used to this style. I teach, small classes. I'm a very interactive person, and so I like to ask questions and sort of get response, but this doesn't really lend itself to that, which is all the more reason for me to try as quickly as possible to get done with, the formal part, and so we can discuss and have a conversation with one another. Let me see if the technology works. All right. All right, so responsible leadership in a corrupt age. All right, so I started before, in preparation for this, to try and find out, first of all, what is corruption? We use the term loosely, right? And I went in and tried, Wikipedia, looked for a definition, and it's basically defined as the abuse of entrusted power for personal gain, okay? Now, note in all of my lecture that I'm a business person, so most of my conversation, most of my interest is really about business. So it's going to be corruption in business, as opposed to politics, those are interesting, but they're not my expertise. So I'm not really a politician, I'm not talking about politics, but in the field of business, there's been, it seems like, and correct me if you think differently, much more corruption than we've seen previously. And I've even seen that when I lived in the United States. This is not necessarily just an Egyptian or a Middle Eastern phenomenon or an emerging markets phenomenon, but rather something that we've seen more globally. Egypt ranks, this is a scale of 1 to 100, and I looked up Egypt on that scale, and it ranks 36 on a scale of 0 to 100, with 0 being highly corrupt and 100 being very clean, okay? So I think the low point was in 2008 with a number of 28, and the high point was in 2014 with 37 points. This is what it looks like from 2006 up to 2015. These are the numbers for Egypt. If you were wondering how does Egypt compare to the rest of the world, you can see that, you can't really see because the colors are a little bit blurred, but we're not in the bottom third, and we're not in the top third. We're somewhere in the middle, okay? So we're not among the most clean, and we're not among the most corrupt. We're somewhere in the middle. And it looks, at least by the numbers we see in front of us, that actually the trend is going upwards, which is a good thing. I always like, when I talk, to be positive. So it looks like it's going up. From 2008, at least to 2015, the numbers have slightly improved. So the question to you is, do you think we live in a corrupt age? If you think we live in a corrupt age, raise your hand. Okay, so the rest of you don't think we live in a corrupt age? About 50-50? Fine, fair enough. Fair enough, maybe the rest of you, or maybe you think it's very corrupt, I don't know. All right, I tried to, rack my brain and sort of try to remember some incidents of corruption that I can recall. Maybe the most memorable one was, like I said, I was at Texas A&M University, which is a small college town called College Station, Texas. Right next to us is a major city called Houston, okay? And in Houston, you know Houston, everybody's familiar with Houston, there's a huge corporation that all my students were dying to go to work for called Enron. Anybody heard of Enron? Yes, okay. So I was actually a professor at the time at Texas A&M. We used to go to Enron to visit, and my students, that was their dream, to go work for Enron. And so the collapse of Enron at the time was a major, major blow, was something that really rocked our world and got us thinking about what is going on? What is going on in the business industry that is causing such a mega organization to collapse, causing the CEO and several other senior executives of Enron to actually commit suicide because it was such a scandalous event that they would rather die than be, you know, stand up trial and be convicted of various felonies and crimes. And at the time also, if you recall the Enron case, it was linked with Anderson, and Anderson at the time fell as well, one of the big five, Anderson, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Pete Marwick, and so on. And so Anderson no longer existed after this fiasco. So it was a big deal at the time, especially if there are accountants in the room, auditors, you're very familiar with this case. And so it got me thinking at the times, what is going on in the business world that is causing us to have such scandalous events? Another thing that happened, I lived in Chicago after I moved from Texas. Does anybody know this guy? He was actually the governor of Illinois. And right when Obama got elected, he actually was accused. Obama had a Senate seat in Illinois, okay? And this guy, the governor of Illinois, was accused of trying to sell Obama's seat, which basically means what? It basically means that he was promising somebody, I'll give you Obama's Senate seat, I will appoint you, because remember, Obama was leaving in the middle of his term, if you give me something in return, okay? So he actually, luckily, he was convicted. Him and his chief of staff, they were charged of corruption. He was impeached by the Illinois General Assembly, removed from office by the Illinois Senate. And, you know, it was a big, big scandal. And there's many of those. I have a whole list of things that I started to think about. I'm sure you have your own, you know, lists of scandalous events that occurred that maybe a few decades ago we wouldn't have heard about, okay? FIFA, okay? If you haven't heard of Blagovic, then you've heard of FIFA, yes? Qatar, big scandal. Soccer, yes? Yes? Mercedes, you've heard of the Mercedes case, Volkswagen, their emissions, right? Things that, you know, Volkswagen, a German company, the epitome of, you know, rigidity and control and quality. And here they are being accused again of some form of corruption or abuse of power, if you will. Okay, 76 people surveyed said that they think that moral standards in business are questionable. 96% believe that executives in senior positions put their personal interest above those of the public. In a study of Fortune 100 companies, 40% of CEOs were found to have recently been engaged in activities that could be considered unethical. These are whopping numbers, okay? And if I surveyed the room, we would have, I think, similar numbers as well. I did a quick Google search this morning. I just Googled the word corruption just for my amusement, and I took a screenshot of what I found. These are just some of the things that are listed today as corruptions, right? You can do it when you go home, okay? All right. Categories of what we consider in business, and these are very general categories, right? Taking unfair advantage of a position, being in a position and using that position to further my personal agenda, okay? That's taking unfair advantage. Committing acts of personal decadence, accepting lavish gifts, for example. Medical doctors are known to be asked to go to conferences for free in very, very luxurious locations. Why? By pharmaceutical companies. Why? Okay, because if I send you to Hawaii and you're a medical doctor and the medicine that is, I don't know, Prozac or whatever, right? Maybe you'll be more inclined when a patient comes into your office to actually prescribe Prozac to them. So violating rules, permitting organizational abuse, condoning unethical conduct. Condoning unethical conduct is actually a little bit less severe. It means that you accept it, right? You condone it, you accept it. And that is the least of the sins, right? So you see something bad and you don't really do anything about it, right? So you think that you're okay. You think it's okay to do that, right? And I put here a little bit quote by Dante, which I actually like, and it says, "The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality." Notice he didn't say that they support it, that he didn't say that they do it. He said that they are neutral. You see it happening in front of you and you choose not to act. Okay, so he's saying that the hottest places in hell are reserved for people like that. That's Dante, not me. All right, why do responsible people or good people do bad things? Okay, because many of us are, we think of ourselves as good people. How is it that we end up doing things that are not really if you ask an average layperson, they'd say, that's not exactly the right thing to do. Okay? And there are reasons. Again, this is organizational. I'm talking about the business world. One of them is intense pressure. The Enron Anderson example I gave you earlier is a good example of that. Okay, there was pressure. Anderson was the consultant and the auditor for Enron at the same time. They felt pressure that they wanted Enron to look good. They wanted their books to look good. The better Enron did, the more likely that Anderson actually was able to do consulting business. And so it became this conflict of interest situation where Anderson was cooking the books of Enron for the good of Enron, supposedly, and for the good of Anderson as well. And so they were in bed together, like we say, in a way that actually made it a very, very difficult situation to get out of. And like I said, one of the biggest events of the 1990s. Poor judgment. I give you the example of Chrysler. Chrysler, they had cars which they would use, and then they would actually change the odometer, الكيلومتراج بتاع العربية. They would change it and put it back to, zero or reduce it, so when they sell it, it looks like the car hasn't done very many miles. Okay? Again, that's poor judgment. That's not, a very ethical way to behave. Few or no lazy rules. The Mercedes example, where they, were found to give Egypt, cars for the government, exclusive Mercedes for the government, and basically bribing them in the process of doing so. That is, personal values are lazy, or there aren't very many. No constraints are placed on how targets are achieved. We want to host FIFA in the best place possible. We didn't really put the constraints and the restraints there to say, oh, you can't really bribe. Qatar cannot be bribing FIFA to do that, right? So these are examples just happening in the surroundings, involved with just like lax laziness in terms of decision making. Excuses for this behavior. Everyone does it. What are you talking about? What world do you live in? I hear this all the time, right? Everyone does it. That's how it's done. If you do it differently, you're just not going to get any work done. Business is business, right? If I don't, someone else will. Okay? If I don't pay that bribe, someone else will pay the bribe, and the tender will go to them, and therefore I have to be quick to pay the bribe, for example. That's the way it's always been done. This is the system. This is how we do it. I'm not hurting anybody. We hear this a lot in what? Intellectual property, right? How many of us in the room download movies? Music, right? How many of us plagiarize? Hopefully not. I tell that to my students all the time. Intellectual property is easy. Why? Why is it okay? You might not steal my bag. My purse is underneath this table. You may not choose to steal my bag, but you might download music. Why? The same person that won't steal my purse will steal music. Why? It's easy, yes. It's available. What else? It's free. Okay, my bag is free too. What else? Okay, everybody does it. What else? I haven't heard the one I'm waiting for. It doesn't hurt anybody, right? If I download a movie and give it to you to watch, did I lose anything? No, because I can watch the movie and so can you. And so you haven't taken away anything from me. When you steal my purse, you've still stolen my belongings, you know? I don't have my phone anymore, I don't have my wallet, but when we share a movie, nothing happens. And that's the big problem with intellectual property. The system is unfair, okay? Why should I go to Al-Murur and waste the whole day? You know, that's not fair. There should be another way, and maybe that's why I do it differently than the way it's supposed to be done. And last but not least, I was just following orders, a very, very typical response. And that illustrates what? A lack of accountability and responsibility. When everybody else passes the buck and feels like it's not their, that's not my decision. My boss told me, no, it is your decision, because each of one of you has the ability to say no. Okay? There's no reason for you to follow orders that you feel betray or are against your moral principles. All right, why should I be responsible? These are some reasons that people give. The law, okay? I will be punished, I'll go to jail. Religion, I'm going to go to hell. I'll go to heaven, okay? Society, people, what will people say, okay? All right. Myself, will I be able to sleep at night? Can I live with myself? And finally, organizational values. Perhaps you work in an organization that has a strong set of principles, that has a strong set of values, like a credo, for example, which they live the credo, and therefore you find yourself, even though your own personal values may actually be different, you find yourself that you're actually abiding and adhering to the organizational values, okay, if you get my point, right? Okay. So I'm going to give you a philosophical question here. Plato asks this question. I want you to think about it. What would you rather be? An unethical person with a good reputation? An unethical person, so you're not ethical, but everybody thinks you're amazing. You have a good reputation. Or would you rather be an ethical person that for some reason people have given you a reputation for injustice? And you only have two choices. The second one, okay. And Plato agrees, okay? And I think that's very interesting. And Plato basically says that you can never live with yourself if you are number one, because at the end of the day, virtue to the soul is what health is to the body. And so he believes that unless you're a very, very sick individual, that you will always choose to use the just route or the ethical route. All right, so this brings us to this, which is our topic, which is leadership, okay? When I say leadership, I don't know what's going on in your head, but there's a lot of people that basically think of something like this, right? No? Okay. All right, good, because that's not what we're going to talk about, okay? But a lot of people think that a leader is somebody that is an almighty, someone who is like a hero, right? I put this quote up by Martin Luther King. It says, if you want to move people, i.e. influence people, it has to be towards a vision that is positive for them, that taps values important to them, that gets them something they desire, and that is presented in a compelling way that they feel so inspired to follow. Okay? Notice there's a lot of things in this quote. Yes, this is Martin Luther King. I'm sorry that you can't see very well, but yes, and I think the reason I like this quote is because in essence what he's saying is that leadership is not about the leader. That's really, he's saying leadership is about the follower. It's about, can you touch the follower? Can you basically inspire them? Can you get them to rally around your vision? Can you get them to be behind you and inspired to follow? Okay, so it's not about you really, it's about those who you lead. So I actually wrote a paper about this, and you're welcome to read it if you want to. It's about this whole notion of charisma. And us, for some reason, especially in times of crisis, this is known through research, that individuals in times of crisis look for charisma, for heroes, for someone to come and save them. They always feel like they have to be saved, and there is this one individual that's going to come and do it for them. I'm going to argue in the next few minutes is that you do not have to be a superhero. Okay? Leadership is not about being superhuman. It's not about Superman. Or if you've watched the latest movie, what's it called? Deadpool? All right? That's another form of superhero, right? And what I'm going to argue is that, and I hope you agree with me, that leadership is not, charisma is nice. But leadership is not only about charisma. There's a lot of other things. Each of us can be a leader in our own, actually is a leader in our own way, in our communities, in our schools, you know, in your families, in your work. Each of you has some form of a leadership role in your circle of influence. The other thing I want to talk about, when I tell you improve your leadership, what are you thinking about when I say that? What about your qualities? Okay. A plan, okay, good. How many of you think about the fact that I'm not a very good communicator, perhaps I need to be better, okay? You know, that's very, very common. It's about performance improvement a lot of times is about fixing what you're not good at. Right? How many times, you're too old for this, but let's say that you're still at school and you go home with a report card to your parents. What do they look at? You have 5 A's and a B. What do your parents want to talk about? The B, right? Okay? And so for some reason ingrained in us is this idea that we have to fix whatever is wrong. Right? Performance improvement means I need to work on my B, right? My mother told me this one time is she got into her field, the field she was really good, but the field she got into was as a tahaddi because she wasn't good at it. And so she decided that's what she's going to do. She's going to take the thing that she's not good at and get better at. I'm going to argue that this is not a good way to develop leadership, okay? That fixing your weaknesses is not what you should be aiming for. Okay? What you should be aiming for instead is to develop your strengths. Okay? So understanding yourself, some of you said that, and understanding your strengths, each of us has strengths. Developing those through competency skills, okay, is what's going to make you outstanding, not fixing your weaknesses. If I give you names of famous leaders throughout time and tell you what you remember about them, you're going to give me everything good that you remember about them. I can assure you that each one of those individuals has also some flaws and has some weaknesses, but you won't remember that because you are focused on their strengths. So get the power of perception working for you, okay? Work on those things that you are very strong at and make them better, and your weaknesses will fade because people won't even remember them. All right, and I love this picture, okay? I don't know if you want to think of yourself as the cow or the dolphin. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, dolphin will never be a cow, and the cow will never be a dolphin, and that's what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that if you're a cow, forgive me, that's not what I mean, but you know, figure out who you are, work within those strengths, because you're never going to be the other thing, right? And neither of you are going to fly, by the way, neither the dolphin nor the cow. All right, so like you said, understanding who we are, what impact do we have, and more importantly, what impact can we have, I think are important questions you need to ask yourself. Okay? Leadership, I believe in this. If we had time and we don't, I would ask you, do you think leaders are born or made? And I wouldn't be in this business. I'm a professor, I'm a teacher, I'm a mentor, I develop people, and I believe that everybody can learn. And I believe that leadership can be developed in every single one of you. And like I say here, leadership develops daily, not in a day. Okay? Oops, I don't know what I did. Okay. The good news is if you want to do it, you can do it. We all have the potential, but we have to work within what I call the law of process. There is a process, okay? And there's actually many processes, but I'm just going to talk about one process tonight, okay? And like I said, leadership does not develop in a day. I actually think it takes a lifetime. I think all of us are developing on a daily basis, and having that understanding of constant change, constant development, constantly striving to be better and to enhance your strengths, like I said, looking at it from a position of strength is actually quite powerful. I think one of you said write a plan. I don't know, I think it was you. Create that environment for growth. And like I said before, it's really about the people you're leading. And so thinking about others is actually, whatever you want to call it, paying it forward, developing others, having followers, inspiring others, is actually a great way to develop yourself as well. It's actually the only way. If you want to be a leader, you have to always have people that you are developing, that you are proud of saying that, you know, I worked with him and look at him today, okay? As opposed to being the picture of the sole lone leader with all the people underneath him, okay? That is not the image of leadership. Okay, so the law of influence, there's like 5 categories, if you will, okay? One of them is the whole knowledge of, I think you said it, ability, your skills, your knowledge, all right? So developing those is important. Your relationships, okay? 80% of ability is seen in terms of relationships. Your ability to interact with others, your relationships with others is you might not be the best, the most skilled person, but you're able to elicit that from someone else by your relationships. And so that is actually a very, very powerful strength. Your experience in your past success, your ability to change, okay, that's important as well. If you're stuck, if this is the way it's done, it's always been done, you don't want to change, obviously, everything I'm saying here will not apply. So the need and the ability to change is also important. And last and perhaps most important is the notion of character, integrity, whatever, morality, ethics. All of these things are actually not only important, but they're actually central. This is the leadership tent, okay, adapted from Lewis Allen Worldwide. I'm a certified leadership coach, and under this umbrella, under Zenger and Folkman. And character, as you can see, this is a tent, okay? It has how many pillars? It has 5. And you can see that character, over and over again in research, shows up to be one of the most important determinants of success and of leadership ability. All right, and so there are actually 16 competencies in this thing, and you can, they're all listed in front of you, with character being at the center of them. And this approach basically says I would actually, if we were together here for a while, let's say for 3-4 months, I would actually give you like an instrument to measure your abilities and your strengths, and on these 16 competencies. And all I would need is for you to be strong in 3. If you have 3 strengths out of these 16, we would work on developing those 3 strengths in what we call competency strengths, all right? So, for example, if you have a strength in building relationships, we would work on developing others, because that would enhance that perception of your ability to build relationships, if you see what I mean. We don't have time to talk about it, but I'm just giving you an idea that all you need is to be strong in 3 things. That's all I want you to know. That's not hard, out of the 16, okay? With, like I said, character being sort of an indisputable one, okay? Integrity, morality, and character are indisputable. It's one of those things you can be good at one, not the other, but character is central. All right. So using this approach, you basically look at these competencies, you try to connect them, and you leverage combinations of them. And it's actually a nonlinear method of growth. It allows you to grow exponentially. But you have to be willing to accept feedback. You have to be willing for people to tell you, you're not very good at this, or you're very good at this. And accepting that feedback and being receptive to it is a part of the process. Building on your strength. Now, if you have a fatal flaw, then you have to fix that, okay? And fatal flaws are things that are insurmountable. But if it's just a weakness, then I think we can forego that, and like I said, displaying high personal character. So let's compare unethical and ethical leaders. This is through research. This is looking at a bunch of CEOs. One of them, actually, the number one thing that comes up, believe it or not, is called humility, tawadu', okay? And that is one of the most important differences between an unethical and ethical leader. Unethical one is arrogant and self-serving. The ethical one is humble. Okay, there is an article called Level 5 Leadership that talks about Level 5 leadership being the ultimate, and basically with humility. The more humble you are, the more likely you'll embrace change, the more likely you'll want to develop others, et cetera, et cetera. Promote self-interest, that's the unethical leader. That's the one that when he gets into a position of power, he wants to serve himself as opposed to try to serve others. Okay? And not really thinking about the big picture and the concern for the greater good. The unethical leader practices deception. The ethical one is honest and straightforward. The unethical one breaches agreements. The ethical one fulfills commitments. Fair, unfair. Blames others. This is important. Looking at responsibility. Did I take responsibility or not? Okay, this is a very, very important one. You know, when a problem arises in an organization, do you try to say, مش مشكلتي, somebody else? Or do you say, you know what, I'm completely responsible, I'm in a position of leadership, it's my problem, and I'll make sure to solve it. That's the difference between an ethical leader and an unethical leader. Whoops, again, sorry. Shows respect for others, as opposed to being the almighty, you know, the king. This is somebody who's humble, shows respect for others, respects their dignity. Encourages development, okay? Always encourages. There's always a second man. There's always somebody that you can rely on. Always developing others so they can also take on leadership roles. Okay? Serving others and helping and supporting them. Courage is an interesting one. We could spend a whole day on courage. And what I want to say about courage is courage doesn't mean lack of fear. Courage actually means being afraid, but then doing something about it. All right? So courage doesn't mean I'm strong and I'm a superhero. It means recognizing that there is fear, but I will take it head on. Okay? All right. So having said all this, this is all wonderful, right? But I believe in process. I believe in action. I don't just believe in words. And so I feel like you have to learn how to do all this stuff. And like I said, I believe that all of this is learnable. All of this is teachable. And so I might have the best intentions. I might be seeing that there's a child drowning, and I want to save the child. I can jump in, and if I don't know how to swim, what's going to happen? Me and the child will die. Or I can learn how to swim, and therefore when I jump in the water, I can actually save the child. And so having these processes are what I call a lot of times my bag of tools. Okay, having a bag of tools. So when I'm met with high stakes, uncertain, unethical situations, I have a bunch of tools that can help me make those decisions. Because when you're faced with those decisions, they're not your own making. You find them in front of you. They're not something that you've planned for. It's usually a high-risk situation, usually very difficult decisions. There's no clear answer. And so if you're not armed, if you haven't developed your ability to make decisions under extremely stressful situations, you're not going to make good decisions. So I'm going to talk about a bunch of tools or processes. Obviously, like I said, you know, we could spend a lot of time on them, but I'll just give you a little bit of glimpse, and you can go later and look them up and maybe read up some more about them, and I'll give you my email address if you want to talk about them. Okay? So we have to learn a process. The way we normally make decisions is called descriptive decision making. It's like we don't really know what we're doing. We're faced with a problem. We say, okay, I can do A or B. What should I do? I kind of like quickly try to make up my mind, and I use what I call a heuristic or a rule of thumb. You know what a rule of thumb is? Like a very casual way of making a decision. Like if I cross the street, I can't sit there and write an algorithm for the mathematicians in the room to tell me how to cross the street. بالويم كده, I kind of know how to cross the street, especially in Egypt because it's not easy to cross the street, right? That is a rule of thumb, right? And that is usually how we make decisions. And they're called, in business language, satisficing, okay? Which is sort of like, it's not really optimizing, okay? It's satisficing. It's good enough, if you will, right? What I'm going to talk about is the modified version of stop, think, and act, which is a deliberate way of making decisions, okay? Actually thinking about them and considering the alternatives, investigating all alternatives, and then making a decision that I can be accountable for. Okay? So the first thing I have to do is identify the issue. So faced with a huge decision, what is the issue really? What is at stake? What is the problem? Can I define the problem? Okay? Who is involved? Who are the stakeholders? Stakeholders meaning all the people that are involved in the decision, that will be affected by the decision, and looking at each of them fairly, okay? So, you know, if I'm the CEO, looking at the effect of my decision not only on the lowly worker in the factory, but also on the chief executive and also on the community, am I polluting the environment, etc. Looking and identifying very, very deliberately every single stakeholder that will be impacted by my decision, okay? And then trying to see the impact of the alternatives, which are, I don't know, here it is. So I have alternatives here, right? I figured out the facts, I have alternatives, I know the stakeholders, the impact of each alternative on each stakeholder, okay? And the importance of the stakeholder on you. And then theoretical guidelines, which I haven't talked about yet, but there are a bunch of theories and tools, like I said, that can enable you in your decision-making process, make a decision, and finally monitor the outcomes. There's a variety of methods. The most common method for decision-making in business is called utilitarian approach. And the utilitarian approach is another version of like a Machiavellian approach, which is the end justifies the means, but it's not bad. It's not a Machiavellian bad. It just basically means it's the normal way we make decisions. Let's say I'm the president of Egypt. Let's say the budget of Egypt is £1 million, masalan, okay? At the end of the day, I have to work with that budget, correct? All right? I don't have 2 million, I have 1 million. Do I have to have health? Yes, I have to have some form of health. Do I have to educate people? Absolutely. Do I have to clean the roads? Yes. Do I have to have safety and security? Yes, and so on and so forth, right? So I have to make decisions as to how to allocate my £1 million. How do I do that? Okay, how do I do that? I do that through a process like this, which is a utilitarian approach of basically saying, like they say, where's the biggest bang for my buck, right? What are the non-negotiables, the things I have to do? And then allocate them accordingly. Maybe have people come to me with plans and proposals, convince me why I should allocate money to them, right? The utilitarian approach basically says I should look at the ends. I should look at the consequences of the decision, and based on that, and measure the benefits and the costs, and based on that, I should make a decision that gives me the greatest benefit, if you understand. It's a very stereotypical sort of a cost-benefit approach. So I follow the consequences of my alternative far into the future as possible, and select the alternative with the greatest balance of benefits over harms for everybody, okay? This is part of a set of theories called I'm not going to get you into philosophy, but just so you know, it's under a set of theories called the Teleological Theories. And the rightness of an act, whether I do something or not, is determined by its consequences, okay? إيه الeffect of what I'm doing, and the effect is good, then I should do it, right? And I balance it all, right? So the consequence of the action itself, not the action, okay? The consequence of the action, all right? So if I wanted to be very extreme, I would say that if killing somebody leads to a good consequence, then it's okay to kill somebody, but that's very extreme. But as opposed to, the reason I give you this example is because there's another set of approaches, am I doing this right? Called the Deontological Approaches, that actually talk about the act itself, not the consequence of the act, all right? And a lot of us think like that sometimes when we say, that's just not right, that's wrong. I don't care what it leads you to, it is just not right, okay? And that would be a deontological way of thinking, okay, based on duties, right? So if you argue duties, and you basically say the consequences are irrelevant, okay? It doesn't matter what the consequence is. I'm not doing that because that's just against my morals, just against what is the right thing to do, okay? So actions are right because of the nature of the action. Bribery is wrong. It doesn't matter if Mercedes is able to sell 1 million cars to the government of Egypt or not. They should not have bribed anybody, okay? And so regardless of the consequences, bribery is incorrect. That would be a deontological approach. And this one, if you want to think about it, is like a golden rule: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Okay? This is a great approach when the consequences are irrelevant. Sometimes it's not realistic to think like this. But when consequences are irrelevant, we can argue duties. Okay? When people are in front of us and they really need help, and the stakes are high, then the consequences have to matter. It can't just be about duty. So why am I telling you this? I'm not pitting these two things against each other. I'm trying to tell you that for me, these are different set of tools that you have to keep in the back of your mind as you're trying to be responsible leaders. Okay? You have to think both in a utilitarian method as well as in deontological method. Okay. Another thing I want to talk about, which is actually something I find to be very, very common and very, very misunderstood, which is the notion of conflict of interest. Okay? Conflict of interest means that my personal interests are coming into conflict with my obligation to serve another. Okay? There's many examples of that. Okay? And it's very, very common, right? Let's say that I am in charge of recruiting. I'm hiring. My niece needs a job. She's good enough. She has a master's degree. She graduated with honors. Maybe I should give the job to my niece. Okay? Is that a conflict of interest? Yes. Conflict of interest means doing something that will give you personal gain. It's not even me, it's my niece, right? At the expense of my organization. Okay? What that means is that every decision I make has to be for the benefit of my organization exclusively. Now, if you go through a process whereby you have a whole list of candidates, and for some odd reason, your niece happens to be the best person, and someone else other than you made that decision, then it's not a conflict of interest. Right? Conflict of interest means I am the CEO or not the CEO. Let's say I'm the purchasing manager in a company. My organization is procuring a whole bunch of, let's say, screws, okay, right, for my organization. On the side, my brother has a company that sells screws. So I go buy from my brother the screws. Is that a conflict of interest? Yes, okay? Unless your brother makes the best quality screws, the lowest price screws, and through a formal bid that is closed up, you figure out your brother is the best one, then fine, let someone else make that decision. Okay? These are all conflicts of interest, and there are much more severe ones. As a lawyer, can I defend the person, the murderer, as well as the person murdered? No, because that would be a conflict of interest, right? And so it's important for us to recognize these things and make sure we're not wearing two hats, right? Because immediately you may not make a bad decision, but there's always the potential for making those bad decisions. And to me, if there was one area that I would tackle in this country, it would be conflict of interest, okay? Many of us find ourselves in roles that have a conflict of interest, okay? And there are ways to actually deal with it, which are not too hard. And sometimes, despite your best intentions, you find yourself in a situation of conflict of interest, okay? What can we do, okay? I already talked about direct competition, for example, would be a conflict of interest. Misuse of position, violating confidentiality, biased judgment. I tell my students that they are professionals. Their most important asset is their judgment, Okay, that's why we hire them. That's why organizations hire you, is for your judgment, your ability to make independent decisions. If your ability to make independent decisions can be bought through gifts, through bribes, through promises of positions or what have you, then you are worthless. And I'm not even I'm not even gonna mince that. That's like you're worthless, because it means that your judgment is tampered with. Your judgment is not honest. Your judgment is influenced by things other than the quality of the decision itself and the parameters of the decision, okay? So very important to always make yourself independent, okay? Anything that you feel is going to bias your judgment, a nice dinner, some entertainment, whatever, a relationship, whatever it is, try to avoid it as much as you possibly can. Okay, so here are some ways to manage conflict of interest. One of them is, like I said, independence and objectivity. Always think, am I being objective? And if you're not, what can we do if you're not? Just say, I'm not going to be part of this decision, all right? I've found myself in that situation many times, all right? I'm, reviewing a proposal for funding, and I find out that it's from a friend. Just say, relieve me from this. Let someone else make the decision. Okay, it's the easiest thing, all right? Because like I said, you can't always avoid conflict of interest. But putting yourself in a situation where you are the head of two things that are by design in conflict with one another is just a sure recipe for disaster. Avoidance. Avoid acquiring interests that would bias your judgment. Disclosure, okay? When all else fails and you find that you have to, I'm doing this, I'm on a committee that has to promote somebody or has to hire somebody and they're my friend, I'm going to say, you know what, you want me to do this, I'll do this, but that person is my friend. At least disclose. That's the least method for managing conflict of interest, okay? All right. Competition is a great way to manage competition in the industry, because if you know that at the end of the day, your performance is judged by how well you do something, and there's competition out there, you will be a lot less likely to make decisions that favor your niece or your nephew or your relative because you want to do a good job. So competition is a sure way to try to mitigate at least some of the effects of conflict of interest. Okay? Rules and procedures. Having rules and procedures. You can't do this. You cannot have on the side a business and as well work for us. Masalan, okay? Some really clear rules. With the Enron and the Anderson case, what came after that was the independence rule. You cannot audit and consult for the same firm. That's it, done, over, okay? Used to be the practice for the longest time, over. You want to have two companies split, okay? So those are rules and procedures that help you mitigate some of those as well. Independent judgment, like I said, always have an independent judgment, and structural changes, compartmentalizing things so they don't mix with one another. Okay, how do we know what to do? So we talked about the utilitarian approach. We talked about the deontological approach. One is based on duties, one is based on consequences. Another one is much more personal, which is the notion of integrity. And I like this because it's like an interesting, I didn't know that. Integrity comes from integritas, which is actually a word that means wholeness. And it comes from like an armor that people wear. And at the time, someone would knock on the armor where the heart is and try to listen to the sound of the armor. And if the armor sounded strong, they would say that person has integrity. Okay, what does that mean? It means that integrity is the shield, is what shields you, is what enables you to actually be immune to making decisions that perhaps are not in the best interest, right? And so it's like a shield, if you will, right? So find strength in its weight and comfort in its protection. And when the armor is removed, your integrity is abandoned. So it's important to have that armor, which I'm going to call integrity. Integrity gives us guidance besides, of course, the teleological approach, which is looking at the consequences, measuring them, as well as the duties and deontological approach, which tells us the rightness of an act. Integrity tells us what is right and wrong based on our personal values. Okay? And knowing what to do is right. Virtues, if you will, these are all part of integrity. The other side of the coin, so one side of the coin is integrity, the other side is accountability. So they have to go hand in hand. Not only do you have to have integrity, but you also have to be accountable for the decisions you make. So identify the course of action in line with your values, the impact you will have on others, and balance that with their personal interest and be accountable. Say, I'm going to do this, and I'm accountable for it. Okay? So let's say, for example, we had a whole list of stakeholders, and I'm going to influence one stakeholder not very well, negatively, and another stakeholder well. Be accountable for that. Explain to them that this is not the best decision for you, and I recognize that. But this is why this is the best decision overall, and I'll make sure to make it up for you, in the future. So being accountable. Integrity and accountability are two sides of the same coin. All right. So when you're faced with a situation where you have to make tough decisions, you should ask yourself a few questions. One of them, how did I get myself in this mess in the first place? Is what I'm doing legal? Because that's the easiest thing, right? If it's illegal, khalas, don't do it. It's easy. We're talking about the gray area. We're not necessarily, the legal one is very clear. It's black and white. Am I fair? It's another question. These are simple, again, bag of tools, simple questions to ask yourself. Am I acting in line with my integrity? Am I serving others or only serving myself? Okay. Will it stand the test of time? Okay. What will my mother say? If this was in the front page of Al-Ahram, how would I feel about it? Okay. If all else fails, اسألوا نفسكم السؤال ده. Okay. How will I feel afterwards? Will I feel proud? Will I feel ashamed? Okay. Will someone get the wrong idea? Is this something a leader would do? Okay. Like I said, situations like these aren't planned for. They sort of present themselves to you, okay? And it's usually, you have to make a decision quickly. You can't go poll the world, right? You need to make a decision. It's a high-risk situation. Neither choice you make is good, okay? It's like they say, doomed if you do and doomed if you don't, right? You're forced to make a tough decision. You have to make a decision, okay? Compromise is not possible. You have good arguments for either choice. You may not have enough time to research the issue. You feel neither choice is perfect. Compromise is impossible. You can't control others, and it happens by fluke. Okay, it's just presented with it. Right? Like I said before, like the first approach was the stakeholder approach, like we said, the one where you basically look at the issue and you evaluate the alternatives. That is a logical way, trying as much as possible to be logical and deliberate in your decision making, and listening to the moral controversy. Okay, this is very important. A lot of times we shy away from actually listening to the problem. We don't want to hear it. We're too scared. What I'm arguing here is that it's important that you allow the morality of the situation to surface and let people tell you what's wrong with this. And don't be afraid. Listen to it and make a decision. Even if the decision is to go with a route which a lot of people disagree with, at least you've heard it. At least you've listened to the moral controversy. Okay? So many of you in the room maybe are too young to remember this, but I call this like driving. You know, when I first drove, I learned on a stick shift. You know, ما كانش في automatic. كان لسه بنعمل أول وتاني وتالت ورابع. And I remember how hard, I don't know if you remember how hard it is, how many things you have to think about and making sure the car drives and so on. Now, if I get into a car, even though I'm driving an automatic car, if I get into a stick shift, I don't even think about it. It just comes to me naturally. And I honestly believe that a lot of this, when practiced, becomes very natural, becomes very easy. When you're faced with these high-stakes situations, you find that you are able to actually make good decisions because you've practiced. And so practicing, experiencing, making mistakes and fixing them and being accountable for them is also important. Okay? So, and the other thing I want to say is that you get used to doing things a certain way, it becomes very difficult to change. And so if we try to get used to doing things the right way, maybe it won't be so hard. Okay, let I talked about courage already. So how to be a responsible leader? These are some of the things that I want you to remember. I'm almost done here, so bear with me, just a few more minutes. Develop, articulate, tell people what are your moral principles. If you are the CEO of an organization, develop those. Put them in a credo, okay? Hang it on every wall. This is what we stand for. If you look at some companies that do really, really well, you'll find that they have powerful credos. Credos are your moral principles, right? This is what we stand for as an organization. What is it? Do you stand for profit? Are you here to serve the customer? Are you here to serve Egypt? Are you here to serve the world? You have to consciously think about what is the purpose of your business. Okay? I like to use Johnson & Johnson because they are a company that has existed for a very long time, and they actually have a very powerful credo. So if you want to go and look that up, it's a nice credo that gives you the essence of what Johnson & Johnson is. Focus on what's right for the organization. Set the example. Be the moral leader. Be the person people look up to. Be that person. Be honest with yourself and others. Like I said, listen to the moral controversy. Be honest. Take away undiscussables. You know, things that people think that you can't really talk about. Eliminate that. Make everything discussable. Okay? Drive out fear. Okay? Fish khof, right? We are able to talk about everything honestly and make a decision honestly because everything is transparent. And develop a backbone is what I say. Zero tolerance for ethical violations. Reward ethical conduct. When you see something that you like, reward it. Treat everyone with fairness, dignity, respect from the lowest to the highest level, and do the right thing both in your private and professional life. Being a responsible leader is not just about being reactionary. I know it sounds like a lot of times I was talking about you being faced with moral dilemmas. Much of it is actually proactive. So like I said, developing who you are as an organization, developing your followers and what you believe in. What is the set of values that you have as an organization? Rules and procedures that not only exist on paper, but that are implemented. And when violated, there are, repercussions for those violations. Rewarding appropriate behavior, okay? So all of these are not only reactive, but also proactive. So I think it's important to recognize that leadership is built over time, that leadership is a process of development that, like I said, takes a lifetime, something that you do every day. Building on your strengths rather than your weaknesses is another thing that I'd like you to remember. Arming yourself with tools. We talked about just a few. There's many more. Stakeholder approach, your tool for making decisions that are factual and logical and regimented, using your duty, virtues, integrity, accountability. These are some of the tools that we talked about, and there are many more. Minimize the conflict of interest, okay? If you find, I'm sure many of you are thinking in the back of your heads, what do I do that has a conflict in it? Okay? Think about those and try as much as you possibly can to minimize the things that you're engaged in that create that conflict. Okay? Independence. Like I said, your independent judgment is your most important asset. Okay? Make your asset important. Make it important when I come to you for advice. I'm actually getting genuine, balanced, legitimate, professional advice, as opposed to, he's a mouthpiece. You know that what that means? Like he only says whatever so and so says. He's only bihabida, right? That is not professional independence. Okay? So if you want to stand your own ground, you have to have an opinion that comes from deep thought and deep decision making based on logical analysis. That is not compromised through conflict of interest or, gifts or allegiances or what have you. Impartial. Always be impartial. What does impartial mean? Exactly. Thank you. Hiyadi. Okay? Always try anything that presents itself to you. Try to look at it in a hiyadi way, in an impartial way. right? Have the courage. Like I said, courage doesn't mean being a superhero. It just means facing your fears, acknowledging them, talking about them, and making a decision in spite of them, being very clear why you made that decision, even though it may not be the best decision in the world, and being accountable for it. That's what courage means. And what I call reflective, responsible leadership, which is the combination of the above, being reflective in what you do and being responsible in what you do. There's more, but I think I will stop because I know that you guys have questions, and I was asked to stop after an hour. It's been an hour and 20 minutes. So I will stop here, and I will take your questions if you have any.
Questions?
Okay. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation, and thank you for your time. Here I am.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. So speaking of conflict of interest, can you speak more about, you are thinking about your career stepwise, and you are using all knowledge you gain from your past organization into like a competitive one, or going from the government to the business, and using what you have learned there and maybe informations that weren't confidential at that time, or even the organization doesn't have so much papers that you have to sign about confidentiality and things. So by papers, you are not tied to something, but to your morality, you are tied to it. How to use differentiate between your asset as your knowledge you gained in your previous organization, whatever it was, and your stepwise into another organization or another competitor.
Let me see if I understand. So what you're saying is, let's say that I work for AUC, and I leave AUC and work for GUC, right? And obviously all my knowledge and experience is very much related to AUC. And I guess what you're saying is, when I go to GUC, is it a conflict of interest to utilize that knowledge and experience in my new job? Is that correct? Okay. All right. So in the business world, there's something called non-compete agreements. Okay. So let's say that let's say that Ernst & Young and KPMG, both big 5 consulting firms, they have non-competes. What do non-competes mean? It means that if I work for Ernst & Young and I cannot go work for KPMG for a period of usually 2 years in a geographical vicinity of مثلا the Middle East. Okay? And you would sign that. You would actually have to sign a non-compete, basically saying if you work for Ernst & Young for a period of 2 years, you are not allowed to work for a competitor, at least in the Middle East region. ممكن مثلا if you want to go to KPMG in London, you could do that. All right? And usually organizations will make you sign that. Sometimes if you go work for a competitor, but it's in a different line of business, sometimes that's okay, okay? But it is bound by contractual agreements usually. Now, I think your question is, what if it isn't bound in contractual agreements? What do you do? And that's a very personal question. I think the example that I gave right now, I would feel very comfortable doing that because I would feel like professionally, it is not hurting one entity or the other, and besides, I've also left my current job to go to another job. When I talked about conflict of interest, I was talking about when you're actually engaged in both. Now, utilizing that same example, let's give the example just to follow all along with the academic example. Let's give the example of a teacher in a school that teaches math, okay? And in the evening, he takes his students from the math class and gives them private lessons, okay? And earns money personally from the private lessons that he's giving to the students that come to his class in the morning. That's conflict of interest. Why? First of all, you're gaining because you have access to the students that you basically took them from the morning to the evening. It is very possible that you're not doing a very good job in the classroom in the morning to entice students to come to you in the evening. It is also very likely that the students that do take private lessons with you have a better advantage than the students that don't. So there's a lot of reasons why that would be a conflict of interest. But I hope that answers your question.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you? You spoke about not bribing, and we spoke about, so what, everybody does it. If I don't pay, somebody else will pay, and somebody else gets the deal. Sorry to all gentlemen out here, but it's a man's world, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the women. When you present a proposal, and I'm talking from practical examples, yes, we don't bribe. And what is the consequences of that? You keep on getting failures after failures after failures, to the extent that I have known women who have actually shut down their businesses because they were not able to just break through the phenomena. Yes, at the end of the day, you sleep well at night because you believe that you haven't bribed, but you personally actually haven't progressed, which impedes your organization and the people working with you. So is there a way out where we figured out our way in terms of how to go about doing it without bribing anyone, but would you share your experiences in terms of what do you do in that situation? A little more closer? Okay, I don't know whether I have been clear.
Yes, very clear. So the classic question, that being unethical, that's really what, I'm gonna put words in your mouth, but I have the mic now. That being unethical gets results, okay? So why should we be ethical? What are you talking about? This was wonderful. Actually, after the revolution in 2011, I had the best time of my life with my students because I could sit there and say, see, I told you, you know? I told you that at the end of the day, unethical behavior in the long term, you can get away with it, and I can give you many examples of criminals and crooks that get away with being unethical. But in the long run, for a sustainable organization, there is no way you can continue doing, if you're a fly-by-night, you know what that means? Basically, we have many examples in Egypt when I was growing up of things like that الريان and مش عارفة حاجات كتيرة قوي اللي هم basically سرقوا الناس, okay, وجريوا, all right? So there's a limited amount of profitability. Yes, of course, I can't deny إن هم سرقوا وإن هم هربوا. I can't deny that, right? But they couldn't do it long term. So you have to ask yourself that question. Are you in the fly-by-night business? You want to do business for a short period of time, be unethical, take the money and run, and hope for God that no one will catch you? Or do you really want to be that business that is there long-term? I give Johnson & Johnson as an example. There are many businesses that are, you know, you look up to. You know, even here, like small mom-and-pop stores, al-ba'al, you know, things like that where you actually feel like you're doing, you know, honest business. Now, having said that, and you bring about the women, and I wish there were and like I said, I'm not talking about my program, but if I've graduated 374 women from the program. I actually have a new cohort starting this Sunday, another group of phenomenal women that I will start again engaging with them starting on Sunday for a period of 3 months. And I think you should come and visit me on Sunday or Monday when we start the program, because these women, and I apologize to the men in the room, these women are actually incredibly powerful and incredible. They talk about values and integrity and knowing the right thing to do and being able to stand up for themselves and telling me how, you know, they do it once, they do it twice, and that's it. They've established who they are. People know them in the business, even though Egypt is a big country and we have a lot of people. but their reputation, and I have examples for you of women, we do underserved women. The women that come to the program are not the rich and famous. These are underserved women that come from very disadvantaged areas, low socioeconomic class, and yet they're able to go in a man's world, really a man's world. And so they always, and I tease them because they say, ست 100 راجل, and I tell them that doesn't mean anything to me, because at the end of the day you really are standing your own ground. And they will give you examples of situations where they basically refuse to engage in unethical practices, and yet they're very successful. So I do have a lot of examples of both. I agree with you. I will acknowledge that there's a lot of unethical practices out there and people do get away with it and are successful. But for every example like that, I can give you another example of someone that is actually يفرح ويشرف, honestly. Yeah.
As regard your great comparison between ethical leadership and unethical leadership, I would like to ask you one question. Do you think that we should consider people or persons who practice unethical leadership as leaders from the start? And if they are not, what should we name them? Thanks.
That's a difficult question. What do you think? What would you call them?
Bad managers.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Yeah, you're absolutely right, because like, if you remember, I put that tent up and I said character is the heart of that tent. Remember, there's other 5, and really without character, we don't consider them leaders. So you're absolutely right. Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Sharif. The question is, do you believe that the whole corruption concept or culture can be eliminated in Egypt? And do you think there are certain conditions in our country that promote or encourage corruption and unethicality? Thank you.
Yeah, huh? What's that? Yeah, no, I don't even know where to begin. Like I said, I'm interested in business ethics, right? And I'm not, we could talk about politics forever. I'm not the expert, and I'm not, I could engage in an informal layman kind of conversation with you, but I'm not a politician and I'm not a political scientist. But in the business world, do I believe this is possible? Absolutely. I really do. Because I think with a set of policies and procedures and repercussions, if there are severe repercussions for behavior, and you see it all around you, like I said, I gave you just examples just with Volkswagen and Mercedes, German companies that you would never have believed that they would engage in unethical practice, and yet they are. But then there were Siemens, actually. I didn't say that. Siemens is another one, just in the last 3 years. So Siemens, Volkswagen, and Mercedes, 3 German companies, right? And so with rules and procedures, with a process, with reprimands, punishments, rewards, etc. Yes, I think that you can have a clean, ethical environment in business. I believe it's possible. You will still have all of the other, it's everywhere, by the way. It's not just in Egypt. We see it everywhere, all over the world, not just Egypt. But at least you can elevate the tone of business and business dealings in Egypt. I believe it's, and that's a good place to start. Maybe we start there and then we move to politics later.
Hi, over here. Hi. I want to talk about something. We all know that the business in Egypt is highly unethical. I just want to know, what can we do, the people who don't have the right friends or the right connections, how can we deal with that? What to do?
Are you asking me what to do when you don't have someone who can help you be unethical?
No. I'm talking about if I don't have someone who helps me get a certain job or be in some certain place, I'm just counting on my degree and my courses and my the lack of experience, really, because I can't really find a place to gain experience in whatever field I want. What can I do about that?
Come to my program, be an entrepreneur, build your own business, contribute to the economy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, many thanks for the nice lecture. Very informative, very comprehensive. Actually, my question is related for the first questions about the competition within the same line of industry. One of the most evolving terminology to be used nowadays, which is a talent management program. One of the headline of talent is talent acquisition. That's I'm actually facing on a daily basis of my work. I'm working in the pharmaceutical industry. That you give a bad example for it in a senior position.
A lot of good examples.
But you are true. You are true. It's common. But one of the most challenging on a daily basis, talent acquisition process. How can to attract from other company or one of my well-developed people go away every day under the title of talent acquisition? Is it an ethical behavior, do you think, or do you believe that talent acquisition process through the framework that's what we face is an ethical process?
Tell me more.
They attract people through different ways. They wanted to take the talent from organization A to organization B, so that they offer very competitive perks. I don't need money, perks, different perks, as you know. I do believe it's unethical because as a leader, as a senior position, my position currently, I'm highly interested in developing people, starting from junior, new entry, becoming supervisor and district manager and sales manager. This is my interest, to develop leaders. But finally, by the end of the day, after 5, 10 years, someone comes from other industry under the title of talent acquisition and offer them a lot of perks and take them. Is it an ethical way or I have misunderstood it? Thank you.
Like I say all the time, I'm not the expert of what is ethical or unethical, but I think I'm going to turn it around and I'm going to say that you as an organization need to work harder on retaining your people, okay? Because like I said, if you remember, sometimes there are things that you can't control. You really can't control that Pfizer, I shouldn't say names, is stealing your people. There's nothing you can do about that. It might be unethical, it's not illegal, right? But maybe you can think about ways, if you are the HR manager in your company, about what can you do to make sure that you are retaining people, that they won't even think about going elsewhere. I give P&G as an example where all of their promotions are from within. So their young talent, when they come in, they know that they will continue to progress. They know that nobody will ever be hired from the outside to come and sit on top of them, right? So that's a strategy. And it's not the only strategy, but it's a strategy that makes their young employees feel very committed to stay within the organization. Enron, a terrible example after I've told you that it was a terrible company, actually had a very strong talent retention program. So its average age of people that would stay with the company was like 20 years. They come in and they don't want to leave. And so, you know, yes, it might not be the best thing in the world that the people, after you train them and after you develop them, they leave you. But perhaps you can start to think about ways so they want to stay with you and they don't really want to go anywhere else. I don't know if that helps.
If you are in charge of hiring somebody as a head of organization or department, how do you determine if that person will be ethical according to the steps and criteria you have presented now? Thank you.
طبعاً يعني it's impossible to make sure 100%. But one of the things, again, it's kind of like the process. What is the process that you are utilizing in recruiting and hiring Are you making sure that you're doing your background checks? Are you asking around about their former experience and their former employers? Are you giving them in the interview process a set of scenarios and putting them in situations where their face is becoming very, very common, giving them an ethical dilemma and seeing what their response is going to be? You can put them through stress tests, if you will, to make sure that they are the right person, but sometimes, despite your best intentions, you will only find out when they're on the job. But do your due diligence, as they say. Make sure that when you recruit, you cast your net wide, that you're advertising your position, that you're looking for, that you have a steering committee that is hiring, that is, diverse, that you have women, that you have men, you have young people, old people, a lot of different people on the committee. So when you're trying to analyze this person, you listen to different points of view, okay? Hopefully you have an entire process in the organization, such a senior position, where everybody gets to voice their concerns. You'd be surprised how the informal network is such that if someone has screwed up somewhere else, that if you allow them, if you listen to the moral controversy, if you don't have undiscussables, if it doesn't sound like you're hiring your nephew or your niece or whatever, that you actually want to hear people's perspective and get their input, you'd be surprised at how people will open up to you if they know that you will listen and that you will actually make a fair, honest decision. But, there's only so much you can do, obviously. Crooks will be crooks.
Okay. So, yes, we live in a corrupt age, and especially leaderships, leaders who are not leaders. Bosses in university, wherever you are, people who should be leaders, they are not. And we suffer this. So what are the steps that we should take to change this?
I would say start with yourself. If there's one answer that I want to keep saying over and over again, is instead of thinking about the process and the system, and start with yourself. Develop your abilities. No? Try. Develop your abilities. If all else fails, start your own business. If you find that all the businesses are corrupt and you don't want to deal with them, start a clean business, and maybe that's your competitive advantage, to do things differently and attract people like you that want to come work. Be your own boss, instead of having to adhere to a set of rules and principles, which obviously, that's the other thing, and you want to make sure you work in an environment where you're comfortable, that aligns with your values. If you find that you're constantly misaligning and constantly butting heads, you won't be happy. You will never feel fulfilled. You'll never reach your full potential. And so, if all else fails, do it yourself. And I'm serious, I'm not being facetious.
Thank you for your presentation, and your words benefit me and sure benefit all of us. But I have a question. ينفع ولا؟ تمام. In one of your slides, you say that when you are trying to thinking in your leadership and try to be a leader, not to think in your weakness point, or not you think to fix this weakness point. But we are living in a very, very, very strong world, and a large number of a large number of people become strong in this world. When I ask a well-known person from this strong people, he told me that leadership taught me to be a strong person and to fix my weakness points. And you say that not to fix your weakness point, or not to try to fix it. I know how.
Okay, so absolutely, and that's why I was trying to be provocative. Most leadership development programs do exactly what you just said. They try to help you identify those areas that are not very strong and help you overcome so you can be better at them. I am arguing something very different, and you're welcome not to agree with me and not to use my approach, but this approach works. And it has worked for thousands of senior executives, where basically we're saying something different. We're saying you want to work on your strengths, okay? So first of all, you have to figure out who you are, okay? And so, you know, find a life coach, find someone to help you figure out who you are and what you're good at. Okay? Because if you're constantly trying to work on what you're not good at, you will never develop what you're good at. All right? So that's the approach that I am advocating to you. Find those 2 or 3 amazing competencies that are special about you and shine with those 3 strengths. I gave the example that if I tell you a leader, if I tell you Anwar al-Sadat, undeniably a leader, right? You'll go, what do you tell me when I tell you Anwar al-Sadat? Give me one competency. Communication, excellent. Is there another competency? Okay, all right. Let's find someone who doesn't like Anwar al-Sadat and ask them, what do you know about them? They'll give you something horrible, right? Unfair. What else about Anwar al-Sadat? All right? You didn't say those, and they probably don't occur to you. So the power of perception, okay, which is what this particular program is about letting your strengths shine so people can see those and not really focus on your negatives. All right? And I'm happy to talk to you more about this because it's a very complicated program. I only gave you a little bit on the surface. But take away this and think about it, even if you decide not to do it. Focus on your strength. What's your name?
Ahmed.
Ahmed. What are you good at, ya Ahmed? And that's focus on that and build what we call companion competencies around those to build up those strengths. And so you shine with your strength rather than be bogged down by your weakness. If you have a fatal flaw, like I said, حاجة وحشة قوي لازم تصلحها, yes, absolutely. But I wouldn't dwell on my weaknesses. Okay?
Cow cannot be dolphin. Okay, so did you see that leadership is born as a leadership or leader? Is born as a leader or it can be made?
What do you think?
Both of us. Both. Okay. But I didn't see that if I made me as a leader, it will be like the who born as a leader. Did you think?
I hear you. I agree with you that some people are born leaders. Absolutely, there's no denying that. But again, it depends on what you mean by leader, right? And if it is the hero that I put up there, yes, there can only be one, right? Only one Superman, only one Batman, only one Deadpool, whatever the new heroes are in life, right? That's not the kind of leader I'm talking about. I'm talking about each of us being a leader in our own way, in our own circle of influence. Okay, so it could be in your community, in your organization, in your circle. Okay, that's what I mean. And so the definition is a little bit different. And yes, I believe that each and every one of us in this room, assuming that we have 2 competencies or 3, that we can develop our leadership abilities. Yes, I believe that. I know that, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, my name is Ahmed. First of all, thank you very much for the session and for everything. And do I get to ask 2 questions or it's only one? Right. It will be only a couple of minutes. One is related to the presentation we have, build on your strengths. It's great, I like the strategy, but if we have a team and the team has weaknesses, I don't understand the mechanism, how I'm gonna focus on developing the strengths if we have weaknesses, like how this is gonna be improve the weaknesses we have in the team.
Okay. Okay, that's a whole other thing that we actually can use this for team development. Is that what you're asking?
Like from a leader perspective, the KPIs, I have a couple of columns that's dropping down and it's all in red. This is the weaknesses I have. If I focus on the strengths points, I'm overachieving in something, and I still have weaknesses in other columns.
Like I said, it's a different philosophy, and I acknowledge that, and I realize it's hard for people to grasp, but it works. And the whole point is that we're actually focusing on what you're good at, as opposed, and trying, yes, if there are things you want to work on and your weaknesses, you can, but I don't want you to dwell on those. I really want you to dwell on what your strengths are. And I think I heard you ask a question about team development, and you can use the same strategy for team development, looking at the entire team, doing this for them, and figuring out where the strengths are. And if you want a team that is cohesive, you want to make sure that I have, a bunch of people with different strengths on the team, so we can work together and build a strong team.
Being positive, focus on the weaknesses you have, but focus more in developing the strengths so you can be positive, and relatively the weaknesses will improve. This is what you mean, yeah?
Being positive and focusing on your strengths.
Yeah, maybe.
That's all I'm saying.
All right, thank you very much.
Yes.
The second question is related to leadership generically. If we have a team of vets, people who has experience and been working for a long time, the team is doing good, but it's not doing good enough. We need to recruit more players who should come with more experience to develop the team. How can I use this to motivate the team instead of disappointing them, basically? Thank you.
Okay, so this is a very positive methodology, exactly like you said. And people are very fearful. You'd be surprised. We spend a lot of time just talking about receiving feedback. It's very painful. I find it painful to hear feedback about my performance or someone criticizing me. And so the beauty of this is that we talk about, I'm going to focus on what you're good at and making you better at it, right? And so as a team, but it's also, there's another element to this as well, which is the element of performance and, having maybe a team level performance, right? So your team can feel like they need to excel. What are we judging them on? What is the reward and so on. So it's much bigger than just a leadership development program. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much indeed for your informative and exciting lecture. I have a question. 2 days ago, I was reading a Lahram newspaper. I read that a French organization made a survey that about 1% of people are controlling about 99% of all the world resources. And this indicates that how unethical business manners are widespread. So if there were organizations who would be responsible for distributing resources, how can we owe this the inequality of resources? Thank you very much.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is it inequality of resources, or are you arguing about the greediness of business? Is that what you mean?
Yes. Thank you.
Sure. So, well, I don't really know how to answer that, actually. And perception is everything, right? And so, even though somebody may have a really successful business, we end up thinking that, they don't deserve it, right? And I don't know what you're talking about exactly, but assuming that they've operated in an ethical manner and that they have done business in such a way that they have found wealth for themselves, I would actually celebrate that rather than say, there's no reason for me to know that they're unethical. Now, if there are, super wealthy, rich and filthy rich because they're unethical, that's different, right? But I don't know that, right? And so it's difficult for me to answer that question, if you understand what I'm saying. But just because someone is wealthy doesn't mean they're unethical, you see? And so I would be very careful with that one. Just because you see someone that is successful, you shouldn't automatically assume that they are all criminals, even though unfortunately that's been the model that has been presented to us for many years. It's not always true. There are some people that have made themselves through a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice and are successful because of that. And so unfortunately, because we live in this corrupt environment, we just equate success with corruption. But that's not necessarily the case, right? Corruption is something and success is something else. And hopefully corruption should not lead to success. But because we are living in a society where everything is inverted and reversed, we are equating those two things. And that's not always the case. I hope that makes sense.
Okay, I want to ask about what kind of faculties where we can study more about leadership and ethics, especially ethics. What kind of certificates? Is there a master or PhD in leadership and ethics? And the other question you mentioned during your answer, the expression life coach. Is life coaching a science? And what kind also of certificate, what kind of faculties? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have an answer to that, but maybe Dr. Dina can speak to it. We have a School of Continuing Education, which offers a whole array of courses for adults that are interested in furthering their education. And so you might want to look at their website. In the School of Business, we also have the Executive Education arm, and we offer many courses. I think we have a course on responsible business, but I'm not sure.
But it just courses. I didn't find certificates or PhD. I didn't find a faculty.
No, there isn't actually. The only course we have is the one that I teach actually, which is the business ethics class. Yeah, there isn't.
It's just courses.
There's something called the President Leadership Program, which Dr. Dina will tell you about. Okay. Okay, President, I don't know anything about this one. Maybe Dr. Dina, give it to the mic. Give the mic to us.
There is something called, Rais Sisi has started, I guess, PLP, so please apply to it, and that's a possibility. You may be lucky and get selected. What did you say? No, it hasn't been closed. We took the first 500, and inshallah, in a few months, we're going to take another 500 and another 500. We will take 3,000 in 1 year, inshallah. Yes, Khalid and I are consultants, yes.
Dina, will mic معك كده? Do you want to? It's almost time. Maybe we'll take one more question? Okay. Last question.
About the point of being independent, how is it possible to be independent in such culture like Egypt, when men is always dominant over women, and when women do any act, it's taken in the wrong way? Yeah, that's the question.
So it's a women question. I like those. They're my favorite. So I will give you the example of Sayyida. Okay, Sayyida was a scholar in my program, in the Entrepreneurship and Leadership program. And she's in the cleaning business. She has a cleaning company. And she's doing really, really well. She has doubled her business since she joined our program, doubled her employees, doubled the amount of contracts that she has. And she was in partnership with her husband when she started the program. And I don't like to talk about this because people think I'm a feminist. But actually, she discovered that through the program that this was not the best partnership for her. So she actually told her husband, this is not working. And she dissolved the partnership. And she went on. Her husband continued to do other things. She continued, and she's now incredibly successful. She's still married. Her husband's not mad at her. Okay, and so I think there are, yes, I agree with you. There's a huge cultural, obstacle that has to be overcome. I agree with that. But I think that if you, and that strength comes with experience. The more you make decisions, based on your independent judgment, and you stand your ground and you're successful, you'll be stronger the next time around. And you'll keep developing yourself in such a way that you find that you can make those decisions and the world didn't end. And, you know, and actually it is a competitive advantage because we live in such a man's world. When you are a successful, strong woman, you actually stand out and you become inspiring to others as well. And you can be very, you know, you can chart the way and lead the way for the rest of us. So it's an uphill battle, I completely agree. But it is possible, and I have many, many examples, honestly. I'm not just saying that. I have many examples of women that are far less intelligent and far less, you know, I can see just from the way you asked your question, that have made it and have become successful. So I have no doubt you're going to be great.
Thank you very much, Dr. Maha ElShinnawy. And could you please join me in thanking Dr. Maha for a wonderful lecture. Thank you. Thank you. Looking forward to see you next month, inshallah. Dr. Maha will be here for 5 minutes until 8, so if you have any questions, I'm sure she'll be happy.